The most dangerous person in the room that night wasn't the man with the gun. It was the woman with the notepad. Marco Delante had run half of Chicago's financial underground for 11 years. He had survived 3 federal investigations, 2 assassination attempts, and 1 congressional hearing. What finally ended him was a translator he had publicly mocked for her dress size at a hotel bar, and the fact that she had been quietly building a 17-page case against him for 6 weeks before that night ever happened. This is the story of Valentina Russo, and of what happens when a man mistakes silence for submission. Dominic Caruso did not hire translators through agencies. He had learned, early and painfully, that every intermediary was a potential leak. So when he needed someone fluent in Russian, Mandarin, and financial contract law simultaneously, for a summit with 2 overseas investment groups who trusted no one, he asked a man he trusted with his life to find him the right person. What he got was Valentina Russo. She was 31, 5'4", and built in the way that made certain kinds of men uncomfortable, and certain other kinds of men very attentive. Full-figured, deliberate in the way she moved, the kind of presence that occupies a room without announcing itself. She wore dark blazers and carried a leather-bound notebook she never opened in meetings because she didn't need to. She had a graduate degree in computational linguistics from Northwestern and a second, quieter degree in forensic accounting that she had never once mentioned on any resume she had ever submitted. Dominic interviewed her for 40 minutes. She answered every question in the language it was asked. He switched 3 times without warning. She caught the nuance in his phrasing when he deliberately mistranslated a term to test her. She corrected him without embarrassment and without apology. He offered her the job at the end of the meeting. She asked for 24 hours to consider it. That, he would later recall, was the first time he noticed her. Marco Delante had known Dominic for 14 years and had been his rival for 12 of them. What had started as a territorial disagreement over the South Side distribution network had calcified into something older and more personal, the way rivalries do when 2 men are too similar to ever fully respect each other, and too different to ever make peace. Marco was charming in the way that expensive things sometimes are, beautifully surfaced and hollow underneath. He had grown up watching his father lose everything to men like Dominic Caruso, and that history had become his fuel, a cold, methodical hunger to own what others had built. He was not stupid, he was not impulsive. He was patient in the way that made him genuinely dangerous. He had also, for the past 8 months, been running a parallel financial structure through 3 shell companies registered in Delaware, 1 in the Cayman Islands, and 1 very discreet account in Zurich, siphoning investment capital from the consortium Dominic was building, rerouting it through a series of real estate transactions, and positioning himself to inherit the entire network the moment Dominic signed the upcoming summit agreement and exposed himself to regulatory liability. The plan was elegant. It required only that nobody in Dominic's organization understand what they were looking at. Marco had no reason to worry about a translator. Valentina had been in the organization for 3 weeks when she first heard something that didn't add up. It wasn't the words, it was the gap between them. She was translating a call between Dominic's legal team and the Russian contingent. Routine, procedural, mostly about timeline, when a phrase came through in Russian that had no clean equivalent in the contract documentation she had been given. It was a reference to a third-party escrow arrangement, one that appeared in no document she had been authorized to review. She wrote it down. She said nothing. In her work as a translator, Valentina had learned something most people never learn about language. The most important information is almost never in what is said. It is in what is almost said, and then isn't. It is in the hesitation before a number. the correction that comes a beat too late. The word chosen when 3 other words were available, and those 3 words meant something slightly different. She began to listen differently. Over the following 2 weeks, she built a map, assembled entirely in her head, never committed to paper prematurely, never shared. A network of financial transactions described in fragments across 6 different conversations in 4 different languages, cross-referenced against public filings she pulled on her own time from the SEC database and Cook County Property Records portal. What she found would have taken a forensic accountant with full institutional access 3 months to uncover. It took her 15 days. She had one decision left to make: what to do with it. Nobody in that organization yet understood what had been sitting quietly in their midst for 15 days, building a case from the inside out. The night Marco Delante walked into the Harrington Hotel bar, he was feeling the particular confidence of a man who believes the game is already over. The summit was in 4 days. The wire transfer that would trigger the escrow reallocation was scheduled for the morning of the 3rd day, before any signature, before any audit, before anyone had cause to look closely at anything. He had timed it with precision. He would not even be in the room when it happened. He would be in Miami. He came to the hotel bar because Dominic's team was using the hotel for pre-summit meetings, and Marco liked to observe. He liked to know who was nervous, who was drinking too much, who was the weak link in any given room. He found Valentina at the bar. She was alone, reviewing something on her tablet, a glass of sparkling water beside her. She was wearing a deep green dress, not because she had dressed for anything, but because she had come from a dinner with the Russian delegation and there had been no time to change. Marco sat 2 stools away. He ordered scotch. He looked at her in the way certain men look at women they have decided to diminish before saying a single word. "New addition to the Caruso camp?" he said. "I'm the translator," she said, without looking up. Translator. He said it like it tasted funny. They bring in the whole package for that, huh? He let his eyes move over her in a way that was meant to be seen. There were 4 people at the bar, a bartender, a couple near the window. They all heard. Didn't know Caruso needed someone to carry the dictionary, in addition to carrying. "You're Marco Delante," she said, still not looking up. He paused. He smiled. "You've done your homework." "I'm a translator," she said. "I do everyone's homework." She picked up her tablet and her water and moved to a table in the back. She sat down. She did not look at him again. Dr. Jennifer Freyd, whose research on betrayal trauma and institutional power dynamics at the University of Oregon has been cited in clinical psychology literature for decades, describes a behavioral pattern she calls DARVO: deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. What Marco performed at that bar was a preemptive variant, a degradation designed to establish dominance before any competition had formally begun. He wasn't reacting to a threat. He was manufacturing the appearance of one, because on some level, even then, something in him sensed what he could not yet name. He watched her go. He was already thinking about Miami. He had just made the last mistake of his criminal career. The summit began on a Tuesday morning in a private conference room on the 42nd floor. Valentina sat to Dominic's left, as she always did. Her notebook was open. Her pen was uncapped. She had slept 4 hours. She had spent the other 20 on a document formatted with the precision of a legal brief. 17 pages, organized by shell company, cross-referenced by transaction date, with 3 independent source citations for each claim. She had printed 2 copies. One was in the inner pocket of her blazer. One was in a sealed envelope in the hotel safe, with standing instructions to be delivered to a specific federal regulatory contact if she did not return to cancel the order by noon. She was not planning to need the second copy. But she had learned, translating for men like these, that preparing for the conversation you expect is exactly how you lose the one that actually happens. The first 2 hours were procedural. Valentina translated. She was skilled at disappearing when a room needed her invisible and reappearing the moment something shifted. That was the real art, not just the languages, but the calibration of presence and absence. It was during the break, when most of the room moved toward the coffee and the balcony, that she approached Dominic. She said 6 words. "I need 3 minutes. Alone." He looked at her for a moment, long enough to register the specific quality of quiet that precedes something important. He nodded to his lieutenant. The room cleared. She placed the document on the table. She did not explain. She let him read. 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, he looked up. "How long have you known?" he said. 15 days, she said. "I wanted to be certain before I brought it to you." He looked at the document again, then at her. "This is complete?" "The transfers are scheduled for Thursday morning," she said. "If you move before then, you can intercept the Zurich account before it clears. I've included the contact at the regulatory office who would need to receive the filing. The window is approximately 36 hours. He was quiet for a long moment. This is what attachment researchers building on John Bowlby's foundational work on bonding describe as a corrective emotional experience, a moment that rewrites an old relational template. Dominic Caruso had spent 20 years in a world where loyalty was always transactional, always contingent on interest. What he was holding now was a document built over 15 days by someone who had said nothing while she did it, who had walked into this room with no leverage and no demands, just the evidence and the window. "Why?" he said. It was the only thing he could think to ask. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said. "And because Marco Delante made a joke at my expense in that bar 2 nights ago in front of 4 people, and I am very good at math." Marco Delante arrived at the afternoon session with the composure of a man who has already won. He did not know that at 10:40 that morning, Dominic had made 3 calls. He did not know that the Zurich account had already been flagged by regulatory counsel. He did not know that 2 members of the Delaware LLC registration had received visits from federal contacts before lunch. He walked in. He took his seat at the table. He smiled at Dominic across the polished surface, with the ease of someone who has rehearsed the moment for months. Dominic looked back at him with the particular calm of a man who has already decided something and has nothing left to decide. The moment came, 40 minutes into the session, when Marco referenced the third-party escrow arrangement as a point of good faith on his part. A show of transparency, he called it. Evidence of his commitment to the consortium's integrity. Valentina translated the phrase into Russian without pause. Then she added, in the same tone, in Russian, "He is describing an arrangement that no longer exists, as of this morning." She said it without inflection. She said it precisely as she would translate anything else, accurate, clean, unadorned. The Russian delegation looked at Marco. Marco looked at Valentina. She looked back at him with the same expression she had worn 2 nights ago at the hotel bar. Not angry, not triumphant, not performing anything. Just present, just accurate. The way a translator is accurate. He understood in that moment that the document had already left the room long before he walked in, that the window had already closed. That the escrow account, the shell architecture, the 11 months of patient construction, it was already rubble, and it had been rubble since 10:40 that morning. and the woman he had watched walk to the back of a bar 2 nights ago had been the one who reduced it. The denial came first, then the calculation. Then, for a long and visible moment, the full understanding of how thoroughly and how quietly he had been taken apart by someone he had dismissed as furniture. Dominic stood up. "I think," he said, "we should take a short break." The rest of it was not public. The rest of it was the kind of quiet, methodical dismantling that men like Dominic execute privately, thoroughly, and without audience. Marco Delante did not go to Miami. Within 72 hours, the federal filing had triggered 3 parallel investigations into the Shell network. Within 90 days, the first indictment came down. He was finished. Not with a bullet, with a 17-page document, a 36-hour window, and a woman who had translated everything correctly. Dominic found her on the hotel terrace that evening. She was standing at the railing, jacket back on, the city laid out below her in the deep blue of a Chicago night. He stood beside her for a moment without speaking. That was new for him. He was not a man who stood in silence without purpose. "I want to offer you a different arrangement," he said. "Not translator. Something with actual scope." "I know what I'm worth," she said. "I'm beginning to," he said. In their landmark longitudinal study on relationship formation, researchers Arthur Aaron, Donald Dutton, Elaine Aaron, and Ann Iverson found that shared experiences of high intensity, particularly those involving mutual risk and revelation, accelerate the formation of genuine connection in ways that ordinary proximity simply cannot replicate. What Dominic felt standing on that terrace was not infatuation. It was recognition, the specific gravity of encountering someone who operates at the same level, who showed him that without asking for anything in return. She turned to look at him. "I have one condition," she said. "Name it." "Next time someone speaks to me the way he did in that bar," she said, "I want the room to myself first." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Done." She looked back at the city. He stayed where he was. Some people spend a lifetime trying to prove their worth to rooms that were never going to see it. Valentina Russo had simply waited for the right room, and then she had been exactly as formidable as she had always been, without making a single announcement. The quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous one, and the most worth knowing. If that idea stays with you, the like button is right there, and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people. Subscribe if you want the next story. A woman who walked into a negotiation against the most powerful attorney in New York and walked out with his entire case in her pocket.